You are listening to webfitNews Live Radio. News that fits your fast life.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into some pretty major policy shifts happening right now in New Zealand. We're going to look at a tough new law and order agenda, unpack some serious allegations of a smear campaign over funding, and break down a stark warning from the Climate Change Commission. First up, the government is signaling a major crackdown on crime. It's rolling out a new bill that's all about creating tougher consequences for offenders, and you'll want to hear what's actually in it. Next, we'll get into a funding dispute that's really heating up. It involves Wanawara, a crucial social service provider, and now there are accusations of political sabotage flying around after a very tense hearing. And finally, we'll break down a pretty sharp warning the Climate Change Commission has just delivered to Parliament. They're raising the question of whether the country is relying way too heavily on forests to meet its climate goals. So let's kick things off with this new law and order agenda. The government has introduced what's called the Crimes Amendment Bill, and its whole stated purpose? To create what they're calling real consequences for serious crime. Now, what's really interesting about this bill is how much of it seems to come straight from the ACT Party's playbook. I mean, you can see the parallels right there. ACT wanted to expand citizens' arrest powers, and guess what? The bill does exactly that. They also pushed for on-the-spot penalties for shoplifters, and that's turned into a formal shoplifting infringement regime in the bill. The idea is to give police and retailers more tools to deter theft. And it doesn't stop there. The bill is packed with other significant measures. It creates new, specific offenses for assaulting first responders and prison officers. It also brings in 2 so-called coward punch offenses to tackle those sudden, serious street assaults. And it aims to strengthen laws against human trafficking to close some existing loopholes. All right, let's switch gears and move to our next big story, this growing controversy around whanua ora. Now, just as a refresher, whanua ora are agencies that commission vital social and health services for Maori families. And let me tell you, allegations of political sabotage are flying after a pretty tense committee hearing. So what is this all about? Well, it really boils down to this key piece of testimony from Dave Samuels. He's the chief executive of Tupuni Kokiri. That's the government's top policy advisor on Maori well-being. He told the committee, flat out, that an independent review found absolutely no misuse of funds by Wanawara commissioning agencies. But here's the thing. Despite that finding, the government went ahead and tore up contracts anyway. And in response, Te Pāti Māori co-leader Debbie Nara Wapakar did not mince words, calling the government's actions political sabotage and accusing them of damaging the reputation of Māori and Pasifika providers. So, given all this, Te Pāti Māori has laid out a clear list of demands. They're calling for a public apology from the government. They want the original funding fully restored, a complete reset of the current proposal process, and they're demanding accountability from the ministers and officials who were involved. Okay, next up, let's have a look at that tricky intersection of New Zealand's environment and its economy. It's always this delicate balancing act, right? Between long-term sustainability and dealing with the more immediate risks. So, on the sustainability side of things, the government has given the green light to a new nationwide recycling scheme for farm plastics. It's all built on a product stewardship model, which basically means everyone shares the responsibility. Producers and sellers are responsible for their products, farmers and growers use them, and then a national scheme steps in to provide free and accessible collection. It's really all designed to help farmers cut waste and reduce that environmental risk. But then you have the risk front. And this is where the Climate Change Commission just delivered a really significant warning to Parliament. They're essentially asking a huge question. Is our climate strategy putting way too many eggs in one basket? The Commission's chief executive, Jo Hendy, laid out some pretty serious concerns. She warned that forests are vulnerable, to things like fires and storms. But more than that, if we rely too much on forestry to offset emissions, it takes the pressure off industry to actually cut their own pollution. That could just shift a bigger cost onto future generations. The Commission's argument is clear. New Zealand needs to prioritize decarbonization first and use forestry to help, not as a replacement for cutting emissions at the source. Finally tonight, let's take a look at some analysis from an opinion column by Gordon Campbell. Now, it's really important to remember this is one person's perspective, it's not straight news reporting. But he raises some fascinating points on issues both here at home and around the world. So, here at home, the column digs into the government's proposal to cap how much councils can raise their rates each year. The plan is to limit it to somewhere between 2% and 4%, starting in 2027. As you can probably imagine, this idea has sparked a huge debate. The government says it's about easing the financial burden on repairs, but critics, including local government New Zealand, are warning that this kind of cap will just force councils to cut local services, put off critical infrastructure maintenance, and that it basically ignores the rising costs of construction. They're arguing that councils need new ways to raise money, not tighter restrictions. Then the column pivots to international affairs and makes a really serious allegation about actions by the United States at sea. The writer alleges that the US is attacking merchant ships that are linked to Venezuela out in international waters. Now, the US claims these vessels are involved in drug trafficking, but the columnist argues that without a declared war, these kinds of actions actually breach international law. He also criticizes the New Zealand government for staying silent on the whole issue. All of which kind of leaves us with a bigger question, doesn't it? As all these different policies on crime, funding, and the environment continue to shift and evolve, how is New Zealand going to navigate this really delicate balance between its security, its sovereignty, and its sustainability? It's definitely a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.